More and more, architects and consumers want big daylight with minimal obstruction. As we discussed in our picture window segment, you can build large window banks by mulling numerous windows together, and of course can open those operator windows for some ventilation. But what if they wanted a large opening, wall to wall and floor to ceiling, whereby the entire opening could be cleared without any interference of jambs, making the inside continuous with the outside? After I've addressed this key question, I want you to be able to identify these large door solutions, identify specifics about each door type, and be able to identify installation challenges and precautions of these big doors. We'll dig in just a sec, but first, some new terminology which ties into this segment. If we look inside a wall at the framing component immediately above any door is called a header, which spans slightly wider than the door. Now don't mistake this for the head jamb of the door itself. Whatever final flooring is in place, hardwood, carpet, tile, or whatever, this is referred to as the finished floor. Underneath the finished floor is the subfloor, which will either be a concrete slab or framed wood. In some rare cases, a concrete slab itself may also be the finished floor, stained concrete, for instance. I'll explain what all this has to do with doors in just a minute. Anyway, since you can't just make a conventional door obnoxiously huge for that big opening, the fenestration industry has come up with two new innovative door designs that offer tons of daylight and clear opening by spanning 40 feet or more in width and 10 feet high or taller. Now these are in a league by themselves and are generically referred to as big doors or even operable glass walls. And yet some manufacturers categorize them under their patio door line. But more specifically, these are the multi-slide and the folding or bifold doors. The first version I'll address is a multi-slide. Unlike a conventional sliding glass door that we talked about previously, the multi-slide version has even more panels, 6, 8, even 10 panels or more. And even then, each panel can be exceptionally wide, 5 feet or more. As big as these panels are, manufacturers have engineered these big door panels with narrow rails and stiles to minimize obstructions when closed. The panels are layered, as you can see from this top-down view. Each panel rides on its own track in the sill, so they kind of stack when the door is opened. The stack becomes very thick with more door panels. So as you can imagine, the wall that receives this type of door has to be unusually thick, and of course, planned for. While these types of doors are massive, the design is so exceptional that all the panels can be moved by hand. However, some versions can be motorized. And in some cases, even screens like this are offered. Or like this. If you want a multi-slide that will completely disappear, an enhanced version of the multi-slide will bury itself inside a wall pocket at one end. Now the pocket is not part of the door product, but has to be framed in by the framer. Now this is a biparting version, and can be a pocket design too. In this case, pairs of doors share one track, so then the wall depth doesn't need to be as thick, yet you'd still get the same clear opening compared to a one-direction door, all else being equal. I want to bring up an important point now to avoid a costly error later. Most manufacturers offer sill options for this type of door, and some of these sill options require a lot of advanced planning even before construction begins. A standard sill stands proud of the finished floor, as could be expected. But there is a flush sill option that is intended to have the top of the sill flush in many cases with the finished floor. This flush sill avoids any trip hazard, can be ADA compliant, and simply makes a smoother transition to the outdoors. But it's more than just ordering the sill of choice, because the site preparation will either make or break the success of the installation. Here's a generic and quick summary of how some work. But of course, manufacturer's instructions prevail. Looking at the ends of the door panels and cross-section of a sill, a typical standard sill installs directly on the subfloor and stands proud of the finished floor. Pretty straightforward. But the flush sill, and this sill is a different design altogether, is flat across the top and might need to be recessed into the subfloor to end up flush with the finished floor. Here is where you can see that planning in advance is critical as to how you pour or frame your subfloor or plan your finished floor. It may even be possible to bring the patio also flush with the sill. But since most of these sills drain internally and must have an exit for the water, proper sill drainage needs to be allowed as detailed by the door manufacturer. This flush sill door design is a great option for new construction, but might not be practical for a retrofit. Well, let's see what you've learned up to now. Let's plug in the second type of big door, called a folding or bifold door. The folding door also has multiple panels, but ride in one track, and when collapsed open, the panels extend to the exterior, or in some cases swing to the interior. Because the door panels close in one plane, the wall can be reasonably narrow, although in most cases still slightly greater than a standard wall thickness, which would be beneficial for interior space savings. This must be considered when framing new construction, and especially a factor for retrofitting. Even folding doors have narrow rails and stiles. Now, unlike multi-slides, most folding doors are suspended from a track mounted to the header framing above. And because of the tremendous weight of these doors, it's critical that the header is engineered to handle that weight and not slump at all. Here again, pre-planning before construction. There are different configurations of the folding doors, such as this one, where an independent panel opens on its own for easier access. Then the remainder as a bifold. Lastly, a biparting bifold, which may not even have the same number of panels on each end. To this point, keep in mind that both folding doors and multi-slides can have an even or odd number of doors. Check with your manufacturer for their combinations. Screens are sometimes available for the bifold as well. But here's another caution. In some cases, screens, whether for multi-slides or bifolds, add to the required wall depth and may require a larger offset framed opening than the door itself. Again, check with the manufacturer's specifications carefully. As I wrap up, I'll summarize unique precautions for big doors. For multi-slides, remember that the framing requires thicker walls and construction of the pocket, and account for even more wall thickness for a screen, if applicable. The flush sill may require a subfloor recess that accounts for the finished floor thickness. And be sure you're accommodating sill drainage. Verify that a retrofit is practical. For folding doors, wall depth is a lesser factor but still a consideration. Watch for potential interference beforehand, such as an existing awning, low soffit, or whatever, to allow for folding clearance. A structurally strong header is an easy one for new construction, but will be much trickier for retrofitting. Having said all that, there is more, but I won't cover it here. But big doors continue to evolve. For instance, door tracks may carry the panels in crazy directions to move the panels out of the way differently. Some multi-slide panels can actually swing individually and then slide and stack at the end. Some big doors can actually be wall corners. And there are interior versions as well. What do they think of next? Sell its awesomeness. Pre-plan accordingly for the installation, and your clients will be thrilled. See you soon.